in the Dáil and in politics in Ireland and around the world. Please like, share, all that good stuff, and put any questions you have in the comments. I'm on live on Instagram and on TikTok at the moment. I'm going to focus today on what was in the budget, which was obviously announced yesterday, and maybe particularly deal with kind of questions relating to the budget. So in particular, if you have any questions about the budget, I'll do my very best to answer them. If they're extremely detailed, if you're telling me, everything about yourself and how much you benefit, I may not be able to answer in detail, but we'll see. I'll do my very best. The main thing that I would say about this budget is that this was a good budget for the people who the government actually represents. So it was a good budget for landlords. They got a significant tax break, which I'll talk about in a minute. It was a good budget for tax avoiding corporations, and they got an increase in a tax break that they used to avoid paying corporation tax. It was a great budget for people called angel investors. Angel investors are multimillionaires who invest in risky startups. They got a tax break worth €500,000. Right, so it was a good tax break for the rich who the government represents. It was not a good budget for ordinary people, for the people on hospital waiting lists. Effectively, there's nothing in terms of the health budget. Wasn't a good budget for children. Wasn't a good budget for people on social welfare, pensions, for people with disabilities, or for low and ordinary middle income workers. Those people got very little. Someone asked what the budget to say about housing. Very, very little. I'll talk about that in a minute. Effectively, what the government did for ordinary people is minimal changes, like say a couple, a family, like a couple, one of them working, low paid worker on 25 grand a year, they get €1 extra a week at the end of the day, €52, compared to someone who's on 100 grand plus, they get almost €1,000 extra in a year rather than €52 extra in a year. And then on top of that, people got once-off payments, so electricity credits, an extra payment of child benefit, an extra payment of social welfare, an extra pension payment, a once-off reduction in college fees, no once-off payment, strikingly, for lone parents, but that's it. Once-off measures for crises that aren't once-off. Housing crisis isn't once-off, health crisis isn't once-off, inequality isn't once-off, poverty isn't once-off, low pay isn't once-off. Those things all can continue. And that effectively sums up the budget. Permanent tax breaks for the rich and once-off measures for ordinary people, and not addressing the crisis in terms of our public services. So just to talk about, someone asked there about the housing. What did the budget say about housing? The biggest measure, the government did nothing extra in terms of building housing, no extra allocation of money for building social and affordable housing, which that's the fundamental answer. They should have used the budget to create a state construction company to actually address this crisis. Instead, the main measure that they took, a measure that's going to cost the public €160 million a year, is to give a big tax break to landlords. And they claim it's for small landlords, but it's not just for small landlords. That's just rhetoric. There's nothing contained in the budget to say it's restricted to small landlords. Big landlords will get it too. They'll get €600 next year. They'll get €800 the year after. They get €1,000 the year after, and every year after that. That's €160 million that could have been spent on building houses that is just going into the pockets of landlords. The justification for that is, we need to keep the landlords in the market. So that's based on a false premise that the landlords are fleeing the market. There's a lot of talk about that, but the CSO figures indicate there's an increase, a 7% increase in the number of rental properties, private rented properties in the economy. And the huge, even if you accept that some level of people, you're going to encourage them to stay by giving this tax break, that's which I don't really accept, but even if you accept that, there's a huge what's called dead weight involved in it. As in, you're giving the tax break to loads of people who weren't going to leave in any case. Now they're still not going to leave, and you just transferred public money into the pockets of landlords. You can contrast what's given to landlords with what's given to renters. So renters get a €250 tax break, so €600, €800, then €1,000 tax break for the landlords, €250 for the renters. Or on a global basis, it's like 88 million for renters, 160 million for the landlords. And like in a way, it's the measure gets to the root of the problem. The cause of the housing crisis is reliance on the capitalist market. And their answer is like, try and get this market, which has utterly failed to provide housing, to work by throwing more money at landlords to provide housing. So someone asked the question there, Mole, no, this wasn't, sorry. Someone asked the question, what would you do about, Mole, what would you realistically do about landlords, Paul? Well, I mean, I wouldn't do anything to landlords. You know what I mean? I don't have a problem with landlords. But I would say that, like, if landlords want to leave the market, okay, fine. No problem. Like, I don't see what the problem is with landlords leaving the market. The problem is if tenants get turfed out as a consequence. But the way to deal with that is the state just buys properties at market rate. That way the landlord gets to leave the market. Grand. That's fine. They want out, they get out. They get money at market rate. The tenant gets secure tenure, becomes a council tenant, and the state no longer has to pay, presumably, for HAP for this person, which is just money going into the pocket of the landlord year after year, €1 billion a year in HAP being paid out, and instead gets an income from the tenant and now has this asset of housing. So I think, like, the answer to the housing crisis is not to throw money at private landlords. It's to accept that landlords are not the solution to this problem. The solution is to build social and affordable housing and to buy properties off landlords who want to exit the market. And the core thing that we put forward in our budget is the idea of investing in a state construction company. People should check out our housing proposals in our alternative budget, which is a budget about what a left government would do. Other things that people are asking about. Someone says, sounds like you want to delimit private property rights. So what's that's about is we have a proposal to say that the right to housing should be in the Constitution. Because at the moment when we say we should have a ban, for example, on economic evictions of tenants, the government says, oh, we can't do that because of the right of private property to the landlords. They're not talking about private property. They're talking about big corporate landlords having the right to charge whatever rent they want. That's the right to private property, having the right to turf out tenants. So we say that should be rebalanced in the Constitution and that people should have a right to housing, which would give the power of the state to say, okay, well, you might own this property, but no, you don't have a right to just turf out your tenants. You don't have a right to just charge whatever you want. Rubble says, Satan's your daddy. No, I don't think so, actually. I'm going to check. I'm going to ask my mother just to make sure, but I don't think that Satan is my daddy. Said it twice, I think. The right to housing bill states you should be able to delimit private property rights, yes or no. Exactly. So it already says that in the Constitution. It already says private property rights are delimited, but now it says delimited with reference to the right to housing in order to be able to have effective eviction bans. Other measures in the housing. How will the mortgage interest relief work? Someone's asking. So there's a maximum, as far as I understand, of €1,250. A lot of people are going to be excluded from it. You're going to have to be on a tracker or a variable rate in order to be able to avail of it. So loads of people who have seen their mortgages go up substantially are excluded from it. And it, like, for us, what the answer we have in our budget is, and we have a bill for this, is there should be a cap on the maximum that a bank is allowed to charge. The banks have tripled their profits this year. They're on track to triple their profits this year compared to last year. And they're making huge money because they have over €50 billion on deposit with the European Central Bank at high interest rates at the moment. They're ripping people off. And we should have a limit. We should say it's not legal to charge more than 3% for ordinary people. Who owns a central bank system? Well, the European Central Bank is set up as this supposedly independent institution. Then you have, like, each of the national central banks is a part of the European Central Bank. But, like, the problem is it's like as part of the setting up of the European Union and the Eurozone, actually, you had the setting up of the European Central Bank as a supposedly independent institution, free of any democratic check or control, which means that in reality it's run in the interests of the major financial institutions. Other measures, healthcare. There's effectively nothing in the budget in terms of healthcare. There's an interesting quote from a senior government source, presumably a minister, to the journal.ie to say health was not a priority for this year's budget, and that's absolutely clear. Effectively nothing in terms of mental health care, nothing on the crucial question of extra beds in our hospital system. That's the answer. That's why we have 1 million people almost on public hospital waiting lists, and we have just over half the EU average of beds per person. That's the fundamental problem in our housing system. Oisin Clarke says the bank levy being introduced that will slash their profit. It's a tiny bank levy of 200 million in total when you're talking about them making billions and billions of euros. If a landlord rents 1 or 2 houses, do you think they should be taxed the same as someone who lets 10? Well, I think they should be taxed just like everybody else is taxed. You know, they shouldn't be paying any less tax than renters. So they should be taxed on the basis of a progressive income tax system. We're in favour of an income tax system whereby once you earn over 100,000 euros, you would pay more in tax. So then in that case, someone with 10 would pay more. And we should not have this exemption whereby the big corporate landlords don't pay that sort of tax, the way they're structured to effectively avoid paying tax. They didn't extend Help to Buy to second homes. Public transport, Prince, I think you've asked that a couple of times. They gave 23 million, 28 million, somewhere, I think it's 23 million in expanding public transport, which is almost nothing. Like, you'll have seen in terms of climate, they've got headlines for having this, 3 billion climate fund, or sometimes you'll see it says a 14 billion climate fund. So the 14 billion fund, they said they got rid of one rainy day fund, and then they set up 2 other rainy day funds, one of which is called the Infrastructure, Nature and Climate Fund, or Climate and Nature Fund. It's a 14 billion euro fund, only 3 billion of which is like designated to do with climate, right? So it's only 3 billion, not 14 billion. But in particular, it's just they're putting this money away to deal with a climate problem in the future when the climate chaos and catastrophe is happening right now, and the sooner you invest in free frequent public transport, in retrofitting people's homes and putting solar panels on people's home and proper installation and state investment in renewables, the sooner you do that, the sooner you'll have an impact in terms of reducing carbon emissions and addressing the biodiversity crisis. So it doesn't make any sense at all to put it away, and I'd be worried that what it's about is putting money away in order to buy carbon credits in the future, or pay fines at an EU level. Should public transport be made private because CIE are failing miserably? No, I think we should have proper investment in public transport. I think that, look at the private housing market, that's failing absolutely miserably. Look at the cost of living crisis, that's caused by private companies profiteering. 2/3 of it's caused by private profiteering. So the answer is to properly invest in public transport, to expand it, and to make it free. What is PVP's approach to biodiversity? There's a huge biodiversity crisis taking place. You look at the devastation of our waters, you look at what's happening in Lough Neagh at the moment. I'm sure people have seen the largest freshwater lake in Britain and Ireland. In Timon Park, the River Poddle has been being polluted in Blessington. You have algae blooms taking place. So we need to address the biodiversity crisis. We need to do it urgently. The way to do that is the most important issue, the driving factor in terms of the loss of biodiversity is what's called land use change, which is about the industrialised model of farming that is adopted in this country. So we put forward in our budget a massive expansion of the acre scheme, which is fundamentally about paying farmers to shift away, guaranteeing a decent income for farmers, shift away from the industrialised models of beef and dairy farming and engage in regenerative farming, protecting our nature. How will the housing health issues be solved? Well, they'll probably be solved, unfortunately, by having to kick out the government. I mean, unfortunately, I'd like to kick out the government, but unfortunately, as in, that means they won't be solved by this government. They won't be solved now. We need a government, a left government, that is actually going to put people's needs first, that is going to stand up to the profiteers in housing, the corporate landlords, the private developers, profiteers in healthcare, who make money from the crisis in the health service, the likes of Larry Goodman, all the private hospital groups, and then invest in building a national health service. Quality service, free at the point of use, one tier, invest in social and affordable housing. Someone asked, when does 18-year-old child benefit start? I think from January, but just double check that. Good question, Jennifer. What do you think about the plan to have tiers to disability payments? I think it's scandalous. I think it's a copy of what the Tories did in Britain with the work capability assessments. People can either work or they can't work. So we're going to be fighting. This isn't introduced yet. The government's only kind of floating the idea in what's known as a green paper. So we're going to be fighting this strongly. Am I woke? Yeah, I've been awake since about 7 this morning, so I have a young baby. Is there a genuine reason for me, is a good question, as a young person to stay in this country? Yeah, I think there is. It's to fight for change. The vast majority of young people are looking to the left. They're looking for change in this country. That's positive. We have to, if everyone just leaves, and I don't blame people for leaving. I understand why people are leaving. But then things aren't going to get any better. I would encourage people, if you're open to it, stay and fight. Build a movement. And like we saw in the water charges movement, you can build a movement from below that forces change. That's what we need to do in terms of housing. That's what we need to do in terms of the climate crisis. That's what we need to do in terms of health service. That's what we need to do. John McCarthy, do we need to incentivise landlords to stay in the market? I don't think so. Can we move towards an Austrian model? Yes, in the sense of a significantly higher degree of public housing. What have the government gotten right in the budget? Very little. Jesus. Look, obviously anything that people get, but in real terms, they've increased, for example, they've increased pensions and social welfare payments by €12. But that's a loss in real terms when you take into account inflation. Someone says I just ignored them, so put your question back in. That's no use to people, and then they kind of paper over it by having these once-off payments. So illness benefit, it would be a rise, I'm fairly certain, it's of €12 again. That's the kind of basic rise. No matter what the budget was, you'd be complaining. Get over yourself. I will get over myself. I wouldn't be complaining if they actually did things. Where's our budget document? I have a copy of it here. We outline in detail of what we think they should be doing. A better future is possible. A budget for a left government. We've got all the numbers in there of what's required, outlining how the money can be raised, outlining the enormous wealth. Corporate profits have quadrupled over the past decade. The top 5% of the population, the millionaires in this country, have personal wealth of 3.8 billion euros. It's a question, 388. I'll just double check that. It's a question of using that wealth in the interest, 388 billion, the top 5% of the population have between them, an average of 4.2 million each. Using that wealth, taking that wealth into public hands, and taking the key sections of the economy into public hands to address all of the crisis that we have. What are the Muppets in government thinking? It's a good question. I think, the truth is, I think they're doing it. They are representing the people they represent. I don't mean the people who vote for them. I think some people who vote for them, they're not acting in their own best interest, but I think this government represents landlords, big corporate landlords. What more evidence do you want? This government represents angel investors. That's multimillionaires. This government represents tax-avoiding corporations. They're telling us who they represent, that they're doing that for a reason, while the crisis that ordinary people face get worse. We have this massive surplus, and yet more people are going to slip into poverty over the course of the next year. 1 in 10 families are reliant on food banks to feed their children. That's just, it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. That's a series of political choices which are based on, the people they represent, and then
linked to that, the ideology is like getting the market to work. But the capitalist market is the cause of the cost of living crisis. The capitalist market is the cause of the housing crisis. The capitalist market, or the creeping in the capitalist market, is the cause of the healthcare crisis. The capitalist market is the cause of the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis. So we need an alternative, an eco-social alternative, which puts people's needs first. Someone asked, Orchard Thief, what is the difference between people for profit and PVP and SWN? That's a very specific, good question, Orchard. So the SWN is a network within People Before Profit. I'm a member of a different network called Rise, which is also in People Before Profit, and we all work together to build People Before Profit as a broad eco-socialist party. So if you're not a member of People Before Profit and you're interested, you should join. I'm always blaming Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. I am, you're right. The tax system is way too progressive. I don't think you really mean that, do you? Like, you mean that rich people pay too much tax? Like, I don't think they do. Like, I think ordinary workers pay too much tax, and the top, corporations, obviously, the personal wealth, obviously, but also the very high earners, don't pay enough tax. What happened to 60% wages for 6 months if you lose a job? Yeah, so they kind of announced it, and they're going to bring in legislation for it now. There's a problem in that they're talking about a limit of €450, which isn't good. Sorry, Mick, it's in my inbox, right? It's sitting in a follow-up Paul folder. I was literally looking at it a second ago. I will get to it, and I'll get to it this week, I promise you. Yeah, will the carbon tax be added to gas and electricity bills? It will. We're obviously against the carbon tax. We voted against it last night. Will there be a new security ERO, which is like an employment regulation order, I think is what it stands for, to regulate the terms in the sector. I don't know whether there will be next year or not. Rich people work hard for their money, so they deserve to keep it. Well, Brian, we disagree. I think workers work hard for rich people's money. Like, you won't find anyone who's making money all by themselves. They have employees who are doing the work, making the wealth, and then the billions. Like, do you really think that, like, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, whoever, did they do, like, billions times more work than, a nurse, bus driver, whatever, you know what I mean? I just don't agree with that. Thanks, Adam. Dean, any internships available to yourselves? Not at the moment. We have an intern sitting right over there at the moment. But thanks for asking. Good question. These are unusual, not budget-related questions. I might finish on this one, right? If capitalism is the issue, do you think socialism can be implemented exclusively electorally? Well, I think we can elect a left government. A majority left government that sets out to implement eco-socialist policies. But I think all the experience suggests that the capitalist class, the rich, the powerful in this country, and large parts of the media, which are their mouthpieces, won't just say kind of, oh, fair cop gov, you won the elections, we're just going to walk away and you can run the economy in a different way. I don't think they'll do that. I think they will use every power they have to try and overturn that government. You look what the European Central Bank did to the Syriza government, which then betrayed people in Greece. You look at what happened in Chile 50 years ago when you had an elected socialist government, which was overthrown by this horrendous coup, backed by the CIA, put Pinochet in power, killing 30,000 or more people, just horrendous stuff. So I think you may win an election and begin to implement socialist policies, but that's not the end of it. And unless you mobilise people from below to overturn and overcome the power of the capitalist class, you won't be able to have fundamental change. We need revolutionary change in this society, which does mean having majority support for it. It isn't about imposing it on people against their wills. But we shouldn't expect that the rich and powerful in this country will just accept it, accept democratic will, because all the indications is they don't. You look at what they did to Jeremy Corbyn before he even was elected. You know what I mean? He never had a chance to be elected. Did I vote for hate speech laws? I didn't. I voted against the hate speech laws and was the one who led the opposition in the Dáil. Do I trust Labour and Social Democrats? I don't. I suppose. I don't mean to be mean to them, but no, I don't. Certainly Labour, because we've seen what Labour has done, and so we shouldn't believe a word out of Labour's mouth, because they just go back in government and do the same again. The question is whether the Social Democrats are the same, and something that's a worrying indication is that them, like Sinn Féin, won't rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. That's the litmus test. You know, if you don't want to just go along and do the same again, you should rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, say that there needs to be a left government. Sorry. I should read Matthew 25:41. I don't know what's in Matthew 25:41. Not a Bible expert, I'm afraid. Have I read any Kohei Saida's books on ecosocialism? Makes some really good points. I'm currently reading the latest one, which is really, what's it called? Marxist ecosocialism, something like that. I'm almost finished it. It's really excellent. I recommend everyone to read it. Thoughts on Greyhound racing grant increase in 20 million? Yeah, I think it's absolutely scandalous. We will be fighting that. It'll be coming up in the Dáil again. You know, but it's an absolute scandal. We fight it hard every year, and we'll do that again. All right. I will leave it there for now. Thanks a million for all the questions. Genuinely good questions. Why do all you politicians, we'll just finish on this one, all you politicians sell out your own? It's true that the vast majority of politicians, including those who are elected on like a platform of representing ordinary people, sell ordinary people out. That's true. That's what happens. That's what's happened over and over again. People vote for the Labour Party looking for change. People vote for the Green Party looking for change, and they get sold out. So I don't blame people at all for thinking that like this just always happens. Politicians always sell me out. I mean, to be clear, I mean I don't really think of myself as a politician. I'm an activist who is in the Dáil, but fair enough. Like I am elected as a TD. Why are we different? I'd say two key reasons. One, because of our politics. We're clear, we're not interested in being in government to manage the capitalist system. We want to be in government to bring about radical change. Like it's that commitment to being inside the capitalist system is what results in all these people ultimately betraying. Is they just go into government, go into coalition with the right wing, and like in a more practical way, an expression of that, or a partial expression of that, is the fact that we're the only ones who say we will not go into coalition with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. The other related issue is like a way that they get politicians to sell out is that they take them out of the lives of ordinary people and make them have similar lives as like, you know, the well-off, the landlords in this country. Many of them are landlords, of course, and the big salaries, expenses and so on. We don't engage in any of that. We take an average worker's wage or less and use the rest of the money to donate it to local community groups, to campaigns, etc. And we think all TDs should be on the average wage. Like TDs are going to get another pay rise. It's absolutely scandalous. And like, you know, if you're not living the lives of people you're meant to be representing, well then how are you meant to represent them? So Peter Griffin, did I get my pay rise? No, of course I didn't. Like, I don't take any of those pay rises because I think it's utterly scandalous. I take less than an average worker's wage. All right, I will leave it there. Yeah, loads of good questions that, like, I'll be back and next week at least, if not before then, people can see us then. Just final plug I give just is if you're in Dublin, there's a protest at the Spire today at 5:30 in solidarity with Palestinian people. So if you can, definitely be there. It's obviously really awful seeing what is being rained down on the people of Gaza and hundreds of thousands of troops, Israeli troops amassing on the border, ready to go in for this ground invasion that will result in thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives lost. So if you can, be at the protest. All right. Bye.